Today is Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. My name is Tom Gerard, and I am the interviewer. Present with me today is Nicole Morin-Scribner, who has conducted many of the Voices of Biddeford interviews. Today I have the privilege of interviewing Paul Gagne at his home in Biddeford. Thank you, Paul, for agreeing to be interviewed.
You're welcome.
We like to start the interviews usually by asking where and when you were born.
August 8, 1941, Biddeford, Maine.
And can you talk a little bit about your family history? Were your mother and father born in Biddeford? Did they come from somewhere else?
No, my mother and father were both born in Biddeford. My father was born in 1914. My mother was born in 1918 in Biddeford.
And do you know where their parents, were they also Biddeford natives?
My grandfather, no, let's see, my father's parents were born in Biddeford. My mother's mother was born in Canada, and her husband was born in Biddeford.
Okay. So you have a long history, family history of Biddeford.
Oh,
Yeah.
way back.
Yeah. And can you share with us a little bit about how your parents met?
Ooh. No, off the top of my head, I can't really answer that one, so I'm not sure. I know they met in Biddeford and they got married in 1938.
Yeah. And did they both work in Biddeford?
Shoe shops.
Shoe shops.
Yeah, father used to work at the old Saukle Lowell building, which is being renovated to apartment houses around Lower Main Street.
Okay.
Lower Alum Street, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He worked there for many years. My mother worked in shoe shops. She started working way back in the pepper mills, back in the 50s, whatever. Then they ended up at Kesslin Shoe, Herman Shoe, and that's where they both ended up working together at Herman Shoe for many, many years. And they retired from Herman Shoe.
And did they stay in Biddeford when they retired?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Year-round, just like us.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about your bringing up and childhood memories of growing up in Biddeford?
Yeah, back in 1941, started my life back in 1941, and ended up going to the old St. Joseph School on Birch Street, which is now a high-rise apartment houses. Then I went to Birch Street School for the 6th grade, and then ended up in high school at the old St. Louis High School before it closed in 1970. And during that time, I ended up taking piano lessons for a few years, and then I started working at Belargen's Market as I was, I believe, a sophomore in high school. So I used to work at Belargen's Market till around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I get in the car with my mother and my aunt. You go to work at Scarborough Downs. So I used to wash dishes at Scarborough Downs back in the middle 50s.
And what did your mother and aunt do at Scarborough Downs?
They were working in the kitchen, and my aunt worked in the kitchen, and her husband was in charge of security at Scarborough Downs. I worked there for a couple of years, and played basketball in between at high school and everything else.
Yeah. And were your grandparents living in Biddeford at that time?
Yes, they were.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you have memories of doing things with them?
Well, I used to play. My grandmother used to go play bataille in French, with the card game. Go to her house, and then they had a friend that lived across. I think her name was Rachel. She used to play the piano, and there's a roof in between the two apartments, so I used to sneak out. Not sneak out. I go through the window, go see Rachel, play the piano, and come back in, climb in back into the window, and go play games with my grandmother.
Do you still play the piano?
No, unfortunately. Ironically, when I was ready to go to my first job, I ended up in a hospital with appendicitis, and one thing led to another. High school, getting out of high school, and I never continued. But I did play, and we can get that later, but I played in the alumni band for about 10, 12 years at the old St. Louis High School. I played in the St. Louis High School band also, but then the alumni band had met with the St. Louis High School, St. Louis Alumni Association. They started a band back in '93, I think it was, somewhere around there. So I ended up joining that and played a little keyboard and xylophones and got back into music somewhat.
Is that band still going?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I dropped out about 8, 9 years ago. I just couldn't keep up with everything that was going on. So, but it was enjoyable 10, 11 years.
Now, growing up, was your primary language English or French?
Both.
Both.
because back then there was more French being taught in high school than it was English, but there was a curriculum of French, very heavily in French. So, and my mother always spoke French, because she ended up in the nursing home many years ago. And the funny part about it is she'd go in there and the nurses would talk to her in English. And she said, well, why don't you people, because she started talking in English and then she'd revert to French like most of the elderly people did. And the nurses would get it, and she kept telling us, why don't you people learn how to speak French? But that was fun. That was a fun part there.
And can you share with us some of your experiences of growing up in Biddeford and what you did as a child and for fun and things of that nature?
Well, growing up, I played Little League Baseball, a little bit of Little League Baseball, and I got into hockey. Funny part about it, our son was born in '68, so back in '73, '74, the ice arena was built in Biddeford. And our son said, I want to play hockey. I said, well, okay, we outfitted him for hockey. We went over to the rink, and you get in there, and there's a whole bunch of little kids. There was forming little teams. So he said, well, we put him in the locker room. We said, you're going to play for this team. And I don't know if you remember, Robert Provenci had Italian sandwiches on Lower Main Street.
Ralph's?
Ralph, yeah. So he was one of the coaches. And I said, what are you doing here? I said, well, my son wants to play hockey. Oh, we're a team, Broadway Motors. He said, okay, you're the coach. I said, huh? I don't have any hockey skates. Back then you would use racers all the time, So I said, well, now I got to buy a pair of hockey skates. So I went to the store, I got a pair of hockey skates. I got on the ice, and boy, the blade is much shorter than the racers. So I kept falling forward. So I ended up coaching that for 8-9 years, and at the same time, I was helping out at the arena. It had just been opened up. So I was coaching hockey and helping make ice and stuff like that, and ran a Zamboni for many years. I worked at the arena for many years. So that was enjoyable there. Then he stopped playing, so I kept putting around the arena, and I ended up working there for a few years part-time, because by then I was working at Pepperell at City Hall by then. But yeah, other than that, it was fun growing up at high school with the boys and everything. Of course, the boys and the girls were separate. Back in high school, the girls were on one side and the boys were on the other side, and the boys would go to recess, but the girls could go to recess at the same time because they didn't want us to mingle, the nuns and the brothers. But we managed to get together somehow.
So I'm going to go back a little bit to your childhood. You said you played Little League Baseball?
Yeah.
And that was on the field that was at Waterhouse Field back then?
No, they played on May Street.
On May Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
Back then, you had two separate Little Leagues. You had East Little League and West Little League, and it was a fine line in the city. If you live over there, you couldn't play with the East Biddeford because you had to play with West Biddeford. So finally they ended up merging or whatever. There was a conflict for a while there. Oh, well, you live on that side of the street, you can't play for us. You got to go play with East Biddeford instead of West Biddeford.
And what other things did you did pre-high school for activities with friends?
Well, mostly like I said earlier, I played the piano and work because the parents. My father was laid off for about a year and a half. Times were tough back then, and money wasn't that available for working. So I started working in Malagian's Market in my younger days, and give my mother some money, and she'd give me a little allowance, and then we go play football on the street on Center Street with the Malagian's son Guy and Charlie. We used to play football on the street on Center Street. There wasn't many cars back then, so it was easy to play and didn't have to step every 30 seconds a car coming by. But yeah, it was fun because I ended up working for Malagian and the old Pepperell Trust Bank, which was on Main Street. Back then, he would give me an envelope of money or whatever. He said, okay, go to the bank and make a deposit. I'm 13 years old, 14 years old, walking down the street with a bundle of money. But back then, you didn't have the problems that we have now with everything going on in town and in the world. So, but it was enjoyable. I had a lot of good friends in high school. One of my classmates just passed away not too long ago. He was the first one that bought a car in high school. So a bunch of us used to get together on a Saturday night or whatever. We'd chip in 25 cents, fill the gas tank, and go cruising down the beach. looking at the girls.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier skating, so did you skate at Westbrook Skating Rink when you were
Oh
growing
yes,
up?
many years. That's technically probably met the wife, so to speak. But we used to go to the dances at St. Joseph's Parish Hall in high school, and then we go to skating in Westbrook Skating Rink Friday night, Saturday. That was a fun time. There was no problems going in town whatsoever.
So you met your wife in high school? Or?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, in high school. Of course, they were on that side of the building, and we were on this side of the building, and you couldn't go out there. You couldn't be caught going together in a schoolyard. That taboo. They used to go down to Archie's. Remember Archie's?
Yeah.
We go down there and get some candy and come back and then recess and so forth. But that was an enjoyable time.
Yeah. And what were your experience like going through St. Joseph and St. Louis schools?
Advantage?
No, your experiences.
Oh, great! Because you had some good friends. I mean, it wasn't like it is today per se. You're dealing with drugs and this and that. Back then, it was clean fun. So we had no problems with the kids in school. Enjoyable.
And can you speak a little bit about being taught by the nuns in grammar school?
The nuns were strict. The brothers were. I think the brothers were even worse. What's the word I'm looking for? Attendance and so forth. You had to follow the rules, and because I remember one time in high school, one of the brothers, Mild, I think he's deceased now, but he's mild, mellow, and the kids used to make fun of him a little bit and so forth. So one day, one of the students got a little edgy, having fun. The brother comes by, picks him up out of the chair, opens the door, threw him out of the classroom. Don't come back to my classroom. You could hit a pin drop in that freaking class. Ooh, he's stronger than I thought we were. And yet you had the other one, little French brother, Brother Clement. I don't know if you know him. You do? Yeah. He used to go around. He said, if you had trouble with your grades, all you had to do was give a donation to the brothers, and you got an A. A lot of people got an A where they should have had a C or a D. But that was Brother Clement. We had fun with in his classroom. We used to have an alarm clock put in a desk that was empty. And then all of a sudden the alarm clock would go off and he'd get all upset. Well, we'd shake our legs like that, and the windows back then were so old, and the windows would start rattling, so he'd get all upset with that too. But it was clean fun. It was clean fun. So it was enjoyable 4 years.
And what activities were you involved in at St. Louis?
Basketball, volleyball, the band. But they kept me going. Volleyball used to be a battle because we used to go out and they didn't have leagues like they do now in volleyball. So it was lunchtime. So everybody run down, get a quick box lunch, and who was going to get on the volleyball court first so we could play for 15, 20 minutes and then go back in again. So that was an ongoing struggle. Sometimes we skipped lunch just to go out and play volleyball outside, and played soccer in schoolyard with the brothers. They were good at kicking you in the shins.
And you mentioned the Saturday night dances. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
St. Joseph's Parish Hall, many years. Cause back then you also had a lot of clubs, a Lightning Club, the Flamingos, which was the girls, the Lightning Clubs were the boys, and they had their own little spot for dancing. But the Lightning Club used to dance over Doran's Pharmacy, the old St. Jean's.
St. John's?
St. Jean's, well, St. Jean the Baptist,
Okay.
which I belonged to that organization too. And they used to have dances up there too. We didn't go to that one. We stayed at the parish hall, and danced with my future wife and so forth. And we had our own, 3 or 4 of us had our own little corner there in the parish hall that we could dance. And because back then you had chaperones, and the chaperones would come by and say, let the Holy Ghost in between you there a little bit, so don't get so close. And her father used to be one of the chaperones, so I had to be nice.
And Can you talk a little bit about your decision when leaving high school to go into the Air Force versus doing post-education?
Yeah, I wasn't strong on post-education. I wasn't the smartest man on the world, but I figured if I could get a little better education going into the Air Force, and it started off. So I ended up going in there just after basic training in Lackland Air Force Base. And fell out of the bunk, broke my wrist, so I had to stay an extra 2 weeks for training. I came home, and then got stationed up in Bangor for 2 years. And then after that, they shipped me off to Guam. But in 2 years in Bangor, I started working a little bit on computers, which was relatively new back in 1960-61. Then I got shipped out to Guam for 18 months. When I landed in Guam, the guy that met me there, I had him in basic training. Ironically, the whole Air Force, you meet somebody that you had basic training with. So he said, "I'll take you around the island." Oh, great, get in the car and drove around, and half an hour we're back where we started. Okay, where do we go now? He said, "That's the whole island." Really? I said, that's it? He says, "Yeah." A week later, a typhoon came in and wiped out the whole island. Back then, over there, they have barracks. They don't have windows. There's shutters, so to speak. So they don't have glass windows. And one guy was in his bed, so he just got up in bed and got in between the rooms, and a 2x4 came through the louver right in the middle of his bed. I said, "Oh, this is going to be a long 18 months. So, no water, no electricity, no food."
And was it a long 18 months?
Yes, well, I ended up being 14. I got out after 14 months. But, no water, no food, no electricity for 3-4 days. First, and no communication. I finally was able to get messages to the house from shortwave radio that went to Brunswick, Westbrook, and they were able to relay the message to my parents, that everything was all right and everything. So it wiped out the whole island. When I left 14 months later, they were still rebuilding, so to speak. But that was a learning experience.
And were you part of the rebuilding effort when you were on Guam?
Yeah, because back then I was getting more into computers, but everything got wiped out, so we had to wait for the airplanes to come in and bring all new computer equipment, so we had to refurbish everything and rebuild all the computer system and everything else. Mm-hmm. But back then, computers, it was hardwired. You had to wire the computers to make it work. So, but now it's all electronically. Yeah. Big difference.
And what was it like being away from your family and your future wife for that longer period?
A little challenge at the beginning. It's something new. I graduated in, early June. Late June, I was gone. I didn't wait around. So, at first, you're away from home. It's different. You're still young, 18 years old. You've always been around your friends, your family, and all of a sudden, whoops, and you get down there, and it's a whole new ball game. You get off the bus, and there's a TI waiting for you in Lackland Air Force Base. His first words, "I am now your mother." It's going to be a long freaking 11 weeks. And they learn how to swear very well, too. Toe to mark. But you adjust, just like anything else. My brother went in the Air Force. My other brother went in the Air Force. So we kept it in the family.
Overall, a positive experience, though?
Yes. Personally, I think every young man or woman should serve at least 2 years in the service. You get re-educated to what life is all about. Yeah. Right now it's too easy for most of them. They sit back, they expect everything to be given to them. But you get out there after 11 weeks, it's a whole new life. You've grown up real quick, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that.
And so you came home.
Came home 1964.
And then?
Got married in 1964. Came home in, I think it was March. And I got married Labor Day in 1964.
And where were you married?
St. Joseph Church where I grew up. I was an altar server there. Now I'm back into the church. I do readings every Wednesday night. We go to church every Wednesday night. With the new schedule with COVID, it's a lot of people are still skeptical of gatherings, but they still do because the attendance has gone up quite a bit at the masses that they have now. But we're comfortable with Wednesday night. I go in there every Wednesday night. They do the readings at church and go from there. I'm also serve on several committees in the church also. So that's down the line.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go up. We'll get to that later on.
And where did you and your wife live when you were first married?
32 Western Avenue, a little apartment on the second floor.
Yeah.
We stayed there for several years, and then we moved down the street to one of our classmates' mother owned the block. So we moved down there, and we were there for 17 years, and we've been here 37 years.
Oh, wow. And when did you start your family?
1968, our son Timmy was born. 1972, our daughter was born. So they're both doing very well. One is a firefighter EMT in Biddeford. He's on leave of absence right now. And our daughter is a certified anesthesiologist technician at Mercy Hospital.
And does she live in Biddeford also?
Yeah, she lives in Saco. Our son
Okay.
lives on Hill Street
Okay.
in Biddeford.
And can you talk about your experiences bringing up a family in Biddeford?
Challenge. But the one funny thing is our son got in high school. Drugs weren't that heavily back then, in the 80s. One day, I don't know if I'm gonna put that on there or not, but some guy came over to see him and said, "Hey, you got a Christmas tree here." In his innocent way, he says, "No, it's okay. See, we got one on the front porch." It was a drug. They called it Christmas tree. He said, "Oh no, we got one on the front porch." He said, "I said, oh gee, bro." But he's in firefighter EMT, so he knows all about that stuff. But it was enjoyable. Now, like I said, he played hockey. I coach hockey. And then my daughter went into dancing school, so we were following concerts and dance recitals and practices and part of the growing up. Go on trips, went to Santa Claus's village, and the usual stuff you do with your children. Every year we used to rent a camp down at Hills Beach with her folks, and we go down there, we'd rent a camp for a week on the beach. We play there. So we grew up very, very, very well rounded.
And did your children go to public or
Public
some
school.
Catholic? So all public school?
Yeah, well, there was no Catholic school back then.
Yeah.
St. Joseph's, St. Louis closed in 1970.
Yeah. But grammar school also, they went to public school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife's been teaching for 45 years, so my daughter ended up going to school with her before she started school, and the nuns would give her some lollipops or some paperwork, so they'd sit her in a little corner and she'd do her thing, and well, the wife was teaching school.
Where did your wife teach?
She started at St. Joseph's School, and then she moved to Emory School. Then she went to primary school, and now she's at Kennedy School as a net tech substitute teacher. Been starting her 45th year. Enjoys her little kids, and we could tell you a lot of stories, but it's on tape.
So when you came back from the service, what did you start doing for work when you came back?
Well, back then, back in '64, there wasn't many computer availability of businesses and running computers, so my father, through connections, I got a job at Pepple, West Point Pepple, in the maintenance department, fixing floors or stuff like that. And then I ended up getting into the shipping department. And then one day, I get a phone call. It said, "We got 2 job offerings for you, if you're interested." I said, "Okay." I said, one of them's in the dye house, and the other one was in the computer room. I said, well, to myself, this is a no-brainer. How far can you go in the dye house? I said, well, I'll take the second shift at Pepple. So then I started working on computers at Pepple, and I've been in computers ever since.
And were you mostly self-taught, Paul, or
Yes.
had you taken some classes? No.
Nope. Nope, on the job, like in the service, OJT, on the
Yeah.
job training.
Yeah.
Well, this was the same. This was
Same
the same thing. But and I worked at Pepperell for 1973.
And then that's when you took the job with the city of Biddeford?
Yeah, I helped install the first computer system in the city of Biddeford because Dennis Plant, who worked with me at Pepperell, went to the city of Biddeford. Back then they had a HUD program or some kind of program where you could have, they gave you money. So he started setting up a computer system at the city hall. And I helped him off and on, little things like that. Then he decided to go to Lewiston to do the same thing. So I said, well, I'm going to apply for the job. I'm familiar with the system. I helped put it in there. So I got the job at City Hall, and I worked there for 30 years. Retired in 2002.
So you saw a lot of changes in
Oh, yes.
IT. Can you
Oh.
talk a little bit about that, the challenges?
Well, challenges ain't the word for it. I'm glad I got out when I did, though. But back then, it was relatively new. You had these big spindles. Like those long playing records. Well, that stored all the information on there. But one thing I remember vaguely at West Point Pepperell, they had these big tape drives, 2,400 foot tape drive. They had 4 of them. And at the end of the year, we did all the payroll, the W-2s, and all that stuff. So one day we were getting ready to run the W-2s, and the other operator ended up grabbing the wrong tape, and he lost all the information for the W-2s, which is about 3,000 people. So I said, oh, this is not going to be fun. So they ended up having somebody, or a few people, key in all the information, because back then they were in IBM cards, so we had little punch holes, so they had to repunch all the information. So they started running the W-2s, and one guy's, I made $900,000. They keyed the wrong numbers in. They had to go back and correct those. So and if the machine broke down, and those were IBM. And one night, because I used to be the operator, one night the machine broke, and he called the repair company, IBM, the maintenance guy. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Well, this is not doing this." He said, "Okay, go over here, take a paper clip, put the paper clip there. You'll be good till tomorrow morning." I said, "Really?" That's why I said, "Yeah, the darn thing worked." Another time, I said, "Put a rubber band." That worked. I said, "Okay, genius." I said, "That's how you fix these computers now?" But those are learning experience. But back to City Hall, yeah, the challenges was trying to modernize the individual departments, which was the first thing we ever did. We modernized the voter registration list. You know how many people were on there that had passed away? They were still on there for voting. The list went from 15,000 down to 7. Cleaned that right up. That was the first project that I was able to accomplish. And then we just grew from there: payroll, accounts payable, receivable, real estate taxes, personal property taxes, and on and on. The one thing I wouldn't say made enemies, but some people weren't happy with me when we instituted the sewer billing. So that raised a lot of eyebrows. I made some friends there. Not the kind of friends I really want, but they eased off just like anything else. It goes away.
And so you must have worked under a number of different mayors and other administrative people.
Six or seven of them.
Yeah, and what was that like, adjusting to new administrations?
I just stayed out. Because the one that hired me was Gil Boucher, and he's the one that hired me. And he had told me, he says, "Whatever you do, stay out of politics." I said, "You're on." So I stayed out of politics. The mayor, okay. I stayed in my own little corner. They can do their own thing. If you got a question, I'll be glad to answer it. But you had Boucher, you had Marty Riley, you had Jim Gratello, Donna Dion. What's the other one? She was made Bonnie Belanger, and Roger Norman, Farley, and Casavant. So I've seen quite a few of them.
Yeah.
They all had their own little ideas and way of doing things and so forth.
But it sounds like staying out of politics served you well.
For 30 years it did. Because one thing I remember is Ray Gagne was the former fire chief. You know, we've known each other for years and years. And we both retired at the same time. So Donna Dion was the mayor at the time. So she said, well, they gave us a little celebration at the Rochambeau Club, a retirement party. So, and couple of the mayors were there. Oh, the other mayor I forgot was Babe DuTremble. So going back to the reception, Ray and I, well, of course you have to get up and say a few words, you know, thank you, and it's been a pleasure, and et cetera, et cetera. And then and Jim Gratella was there. Hey, Jim. I said, yeah, what? He says, you remember? He says, when I used to go down there, I had papers in my hand, and we were going to do something. He said, yeah. I really wasn't doing anything. I was just walking around. He started laughing. I knew it. He said, I knew you weren't doing anything. But that was fun. 30 years, unique experience. Seen a lot of changes.
One of the things we haven't talked about is downtown Biddeford and your memories of growing up and going downtown Biddeford and it evolving over all those years, even to when you were in city government. Can you talk about the changes you've seen? What downtown Biddeford was like when you were growing up?
Well, great, because it was easy to go downtown. Friday nights, all the stores were open. You know, the gangs would hang out. Cause like Friday nights, you had football game. It was St. Louis and Biddeford. St. Louis would play football, and the guys would gather at the Puritan, and Biddeford would play. They'd go to what's the place? It's a little restaurant now. They'll come to me, but they would meet over there, and we go to Puritan get a drink or something, you know. Because we didn't have much money back then, so we go to the Puritan. I said, "Oh, we have a lumberjack special." The guy says, yeah, a glass of water and 2 toothpicks. That was our lumberjack special. We couldn't afford to buy anything. But we'd be hanging around on the sidewalk, and then Officer Gagne would walk by and say, will you guys please get on the sidewalk? It would overflow into the street. The cars were there, you know. You guys please get back on the sidewalk. Okay, we'll get back. Of course, after a while, we go back into the street because everybody would gather there. Mayflower is where the Biddeford High School used to meet. They were right up the street. So, but yeah, you could walk down the street on Friday nights with no problem at all. If the stores were open, there's always Woolworth with their little Sunday place there, and Fisherman across the street, and A&P. I used to go there on occasion for Ballarge's Market. You know, if we ran out of something in the meat and something, I'd be able to go down there and pick it up and bring it back and go for A&P, Edwards Market, you know, Murphy's Music Store, and to name 2, McKinney and Hurd. I used to go there a lot, buy sports equipment. And, Bob Boyce, as a matter of fact, he lives in Olatcha now. He's still around. Bob Boyce used to be there.
And when did you see downtown Biddeford starting to, lose stores and shops? And
I think probably when some of the mills started shutting down, the clientele was going down. The workers were not around as much as anymore, and it just. I don't know why it just suddenly stopped, but I think people just stopped going downtown. People were spreading out. Malls, Five Point Shopping Center, which has been around a while, but you had King's back then, so that was taking stuff away from downtown. Big store has everything. You don't have to go to 2-3 different stores to get something. It was all there. So I think the sprawl started going away from downtown. So we can't afford that. People are not coming downtown anymore. So the dynamic just changed once they started sprawling outside the city limits.
And I know you were gone from Biddeford between 60 and 64, so you may not have memories of some of the major fires in Biddeford, the Hooper Street fire and the Grafton lumber fire.
I'm familiar with it, but
you weren't here.
I was in Guam.
Yeah.
I think I got some clippings of that my future wife saved for me, and so forth and so on. But no, I wasn't around for those fires. My father-in-law was, because my father-in-law was a coalman for the Biddeford Fire Department for, I don't know, 20, 25 years. So he got burnt a little bit in one of those fires.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you remember where you were when the day that President Kennedy was assassinated?
I was in Guam, went on high alert with the guns and everything else. Went to a lockdown. Yeah, 1963.
Yeah.
I just hadn't landed in Guam. No, I was in Guam at the end of '62.
Now, what was your reaction and your colleagues' reaction to that? Do you remember? Kennedy being assassinated?
Are we going into a coup here? Are we going to go to war? Is it an assassination? Well, it was an assassination, but for what reason? Luckily it was just one person, but there's more to it than that. There's more to that in assassination than people will ever know. There's more behind that than just a guy decided to shoot. Because they figured then Ruby shot him, so it's just you take care of that. We'll make sure we take care of you. You'll never know the whole story. Never.
Now you've also given a lot of time to your community. Can you talk about the organizations you volunteered for and what those experiences have been like for you?
First one I had was chairman of the St. Joseph's Parish Council. I did that for chairman for a year, then I was on the council for several years. And I got out of that, and then we started going into Kermesse. I've been in Kermesse 28 years. Then that was back in 1993 I started Kermesse. I was also involved with the St. Joseph Schools. We started the St. Joseph School PFTA, which now they call PTO, Parents Teachers Organization. Same thing. But when we started the PFTA, there was a nun who wanted to abolish the PFTA for some reason. And then at that time, Father Paul Putty was in charge of the parish pastor. And he says, she had written a letter or made a tape. He says, give it to me. I says, I'll take care of that. And he squashed that right off the bat, so the PFTA just kept on growing. So I was president of that for a year or two, and then got out of that. And then I was on the parish council. 1993, joined the Kermesse, and then I became financial manager for a couple of years, and I held several other positions, support services, which had to do with buttons and gates and so forth. And then nobody wanted treasurer, so I was. The old saying in the service, we want volunteer, everybody takes a step back, you're the only one standing there. Guess what? I was the only one standing there. So I ended up being treasurer for several years, and then I stepped down that. Somebody else, Donna Dion, was treasurer for a couple of years. And then Police Chief Roger Beaupre was treasurer for a couple of years. Then I got back into treasurer. Nobody else wanted it. So then I still got involved with the parish because, I don't know if you remember, he just passed away, Bob Provencher. And his wife passed a few years ago. Them and the wife and I, we co-chaired the parish fair for 12 years. So that was enjoyable. That was a lot of fun. Back then, when people would come out, it was huge, which is fundraising money for the parish. And then we did that. We both dropped out after. You get burned out after a while. It's repetitious. So I got out of that, and then still stayed involved with the parish. And then one day, Monsignor Matthew called me up and wanted to know if I was interested in serving on the parish council. I said, sure, why not? I like to help out. So I was on the parish council for 6 years, because you can serve two 3-year terms, and you have to get off for a year. So I got done with that, and then I got a call again. Would you want to serve on the parish finance committee? Sure, why not? Finances, I've dealt with money, for 30 some odd years. So I'm vice chair of the parish finance committee, and like I said earlier, I serve at church every Wednesday night, and I do the readings. I'm also an server, a Eucharistic minister at the same time. I do funerals And one of my classmates who also does funerals, it's like a vicious circle. Like everybody comes back around, you know. So I'm doing that, and then 2017, they started talking about Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center, and they were meeting at the Kermesse office. So I ended up going there to let them in the office and listen. Well, lo and behold, and Dana Peck. But they were talking about setting up offices and so president and so forth, and Diane Sear, yeah. And then well, need a treasurer and so forth. And Dana Peck said, I know who. I said, don't you dare. Yeah, Paul can do that. He's treasurer for the Kermesse. He's familiar with the situation. So here I am, treasurer for the Biddeford Culture.
You forgot to step back again.
Yeah, I know. When I was sitting down, but they all pulled their chairs forward. I was the one left standing in the chair. Okay, all right, guys. So we started off on, with nothing, really. No computers, everything was handwritten and so forth. Then we went to the city. Luckily, we got that $10,000 the first year, which helped us get started and so forth. So eventually I was able to buy a computer, so I'm able to control all the finances on a computer. Kermesse has his own computer, and I have my computer. So any given day, I'm grabbing one of these computers, depending what I'm going to be doing. So I enjoy it. Someday it'll stop. You get tired. But nobody wants a job. Elections time, no hands go up. Well, okay, I guess I'll have to stay. But, that's the only trouble with finances. Some of the positions you can change and doesn't upset the apple cart too much. But as far as finances, it just don't say, okay, yeah, you do the finances. Some people are just not adapt to doing it. Some people just don't want to do it. It's a responsibility, per se. But knock on wood, I've been lucky. Nothing has happened along the way, so I'm not in jail. I'm still doing well. I'm avoiding the police. I'm good.
So La Kermesse has been part of this community for many years now.
1983.
What do you think it's meant to the community to have that?
I think it's enjoyable to see all the people gather, because back then we had two major tents going. I mean, it was huge. There's nothing wrong with having 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 people. The big thing back then was the block party, which was down at the city square. Well, we had two. You had the city square and you had the Water Street. And then the city square would close, and the parade, the alumni band, would march down to the waterfront for the fireworks. And then it was several thousand people there.
Yeah.
So I think it's camaraderie, because I remember many people saying, well, okay, we'll meet over here next year at the same time in front of this food stand, and the families get together and they celebrate, and that was the key, I think, the celebration. But back then we used to honor different families. We used to have 35 members. Now we're down to 18. And it's cut in half. But hopefully we've already started planning for next year, 2020, 2022. So we're starting to line up the ducks there, slowly but surely. Hopefully we'll be able to pull it off. Well, Freiburg Fair went. I don't see why we can't do it unless some major medical stuff happens between now and June. But we can't wait till May to plan this. You get to line up bands and vendors and crafters. They all looking to places to come. So the Rise, you got to negotiate something for the Rise. So that's always hard to get. Entertainment, the big thing is trying to get French entertainment. They can't come across the border anymore. Mm. And when they could, if they went to the border with instruments, they had to pay a fee because they were coming down here to make money. So they had to pay to cross the line to come down here and make money. So that's always been a struggle to get entertainment out of Canada. But that's another story. We just manage the best we can with what we can find.
And you've been part of the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center since its inception.
2017.
Yeah, and what's your vision what would you like to see that evolve, or how would you like to see it evolve?
Getting the community together, ethnic groups, which is I think is the philosophy behind the cultural, because they had the River Jam, which they were part of, with all the ethnic food vendors that they were able to get together, and Italian, Moroccans, little samples of food, which I think is the key of bringing all these ethnic groups together, because they're all doing the same thing. Let's get them all together and try to get away from, well, we don't want to deal with them, we don't want to deal with them. They're different, it's getting the people together.
Sure.
The culture.
Yeah.
It's the culture thing.
Yeah. And one of the things I didn't touch with you that I want to is the closing of St. Louis High School. How did you feel about that?
It was all political. There was nothing wrong with it. It's just, I think from the bishop on down, I think there was something going on in there that he just didn't want to continue probably putting money into the school, because the tuition was very low back then anyways. I think my mother kept telling me, saying, well, it cost us $25 a year for tuition. Now if you look at St. James School, you're looking at $6,000 tuition. This non-resident. The other ones are a little lower, but that's a lot of money. If you got 2 kids in there, that's $1,200. $12,000. I'm sorry, not $6,000.
Yeah.
$12,000, and I don't know how long. Honestly, I don't know how long it can continue doing that, because the parish itself, we put in $250,000 out of the parish budget to supply the school above and beyond their tuition. So I don't know if they can maintain it. Every year they're going up. They got 100, 150, 160 kids. I don't know. But that was a big stigma, and some people are still very bitter about that closing. Luckily, the St. Louis Alumni Association has been able to continue, because now they're involved. They're meeting at the Kermesse office now, so they've sold their building, and they moved into the community center. They got an office downstairs now in the building.
Yeah.
But I don't think that'll ever go away. It will eventually, when the elderly people who knew about it have been laid to rest. The younger generation could care less. They care less. They don't even know what happened anyways.
Well, they didn't have those experiences.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're talking 1970. That's a long time ago.
Yeah. So, Paul, what has being from Biddeford meant to you in your life?
Living in Biddeford?
Being from Biddeford, living in Biddeford.
Good question. I think it's just the idea of being a small community per se compared to others. You know people, you're familiar with people. The upbringing, I think, was easier back then. I wouldn't want to start a family over again now, because everything has changed so much. But I think it's just the idea of the people being around, growing up with the people that we grew up with, in changing. I don't know. It's hard. I know it's hard to put into words exactly what it means. But I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't go anyplace else. It was perfect upbringing. Everything was fine, quiet. So I wouldn't change.
Okay. And what's the recent 18 months, 2 years living through COVID? What's that experience been like for you?
Very challenging, for want of better words. I think it changes all your lifestyle. You have to adapt to a different way of living. The mask scenario, you can't go here, you don't dare go there. And I think it disrupts the whole family life. Because, for example, at Christmas time, last year, we usually have Christmas here. The whole family comes here, the gifts and everything else. And my daughter, working in a hospital, very leery of gathering, She said, well, we're not going to do Christmas this year. You should just bring the gifts over. And the wife said, well, can't do that. That's tradition. As my grandson would say, this is tradition. Making memories, he says. So I said, well, yeah, okay. I'm going to fix that. I said, I'm going to take the Kermesse office. So we went to the Kermesse office. It's a big room. You've been in there. We just finished remodeling. We're starting to remodel. And so the tables, they were all spread out. We had our Christmas party. No food, just the gifts. I said, what do you want for lunch? What would you like? One of them said, well, we like the stuffed shells. So we made 75 stuffed shells. Brought them over there, kept them in the car. When you leave, here's your lunch. Take it home with you. We gave out all the gifts. They opened all their gifts, and everybody was happy. And everybody went their own way, and everybody stayed safe. So that was a fun part.
So, is there anything you want people to be able to take away from hearing your story?
That's a tough question. For people to get along together, stop being bitter about little things. Life is too short. Enjoy what you have now. Move on, and stay friendly, and try not to carry grudges. Again, life is too short to be carrying grudges.
And is there anything you'd like to share with us that we didn't talk about today?
No, not really. It's just the idea of appreciating you people coming over and having me put some words. That's what has happened in the past through my life and the wife's life. I mean, we've been up. Every family has ups and downs. We've lived through it. I think we've managed to control ourselves. Our kids have grown up. They're doing very well. The grandchildren are doing well. And my granddaughter graduating from York County Community College. She's got an associate degree in architectural design. Now she's going to get an associate degree in culinary arts. And if you want a nice birthday cake, go to Riley's. It's just pick the one that has a lot of roses on it. Those are her favorite ones. And the boys are doing well. They both have a good job. So knock on wood, I think it's been a good life. We've been going on our 58th year of a marriage. So we've survived ups and downs as any married couple will do, but we're doing well.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. You have a lot to be proud of, and we appreciate your time today, Paul.
I appreciate you people doing this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.